Well, as I said earlier, good morning. Welcome to Broadway. Some of you know me, some of you don't, and so I thought I would maybe explain why I'm standing before you this morning. I've got a bit of a story to tell and some information that some of you know, some of you don't, but it all relates back to a little bit of who's coming to dinner. And you just never know who might be invited, who might not be invited, and who might surprise you for coming to dinner. So, my name is Robin Dickerson, and I've been a member of Broadway United Methodist Church about 22 years. I can't say that I've always been a great member. I haven't been here every Sunday. I've dropped in and out of committees and back onto committees. And so maybe that makes y'all feel a little more comfortable because that's okay. We really appreciate any help that we can get. I'm married to Brett Dickerson, and we have 3 absolutely awesome children. And at this point, I would say they're actually young adults. Cody is our oldest, followed by Callie, who is the one on the left, and then Chloe, she's in the middle there. Some of you may know them. Many of you watched them grow up in our church and in our schools, in our community. For those of you who know them, this will be a little bit of an update. And for those of you that don't know them, it'll just be a little bit of a backstory. First, I'll start with Chloe, because she's the baby. Chloe was our star volleyball player and beautiful singer. As a little girl, she made us laugh with her funny faces and cute jokes. Later, I'll talk about the pictures we have of Chloe, and the one that I remember completely is her crossing her eyes and sticking her tongue out and just looking totally cute. She may have had a little bit of an ornery side to her, but as far as I know, she stayed out of trouble. She was very much the tomboy of our family, very athletic, very outgoing, didn't really dress up. I don't know that she's ever had makeup on. We've pierced her ears 3 times because she never remembers to wear earrings, so she's kind of our little tomboy. She has now completed college after 3 different ones, and she has a Bachelor of Science degree with an emphasis in human resources. She currently works at Platte Valley Bank in the system, and she's the newly established training department leader for the entire organization. Chloe married Justin Eubanks last summer, and they're living happily ever after in Kansas City, hence the wedding dress in the picture. Since none of our kids are here today, I can say Chloe was the most practical, pretty much the easiest child. One of her biggest complaints about being the youngest, though, has always been that we don't have any pictures of her childhood. And honestly, I beg to differ because I have found 6. It's not like today with the Facebook and the pictures. So Callie is our middle child, and she lives up to every stereotype that you've ever considered about a middle child. She gets hangry. In other words, hungry and then angry. And if we do not make her happy and fed very quickly, she stays hangry. But she is free-spirited. She manages to stomp on her mom's feelings every once in a while. But she is the most compassionate, biggest-hearted, open-minded young woman I know. You should hear the arguments that she has with her dad. She is quite far left in the scheme of political activity, and he is somewhat over on the right. And so they're constantly trying to convince each other to meet in the middle. They haven't quite done that yet. She's now a Bachelor's of Science nurse at Truman Hospital in Kansas City and works in the critical care unit. She's even in charge on some days, which doesn't surprise me at all because she's always in charge. The patient population at Truman Medical Center is one of the most challenging, I think, in Kansas City. Believe me, I've been to them all. I sell medical equipment, and I've been to every hospital. And I know where I'd go and where I wouldn't go, so if you need a recommendation, let me know. But at Truman, she runs into gunshots, overdoses, drug dealers, and some really crazy diseases that nobody ever hears about on the news. I worry about her every day. One of the very best parts of my day occurs when Callie's on her way home from work, and she dials me up, and we get to talk for 15 or 20 minutes about her day, about the people that she's interacted with, and about the strange stories and interesting physicians. And I thought maybe Jane Ann would be here, so I was going to say the bad doctors that she works with. But she also works with some very good ones. I love those chats. Callie actually had a traumatic hand injury in her senior year of nursing school, which almost waylaid her entire life choice career. But thankfully, the lieutenant governor of Kansas stepped in, took control, and after 2.5 hours of surgery, repaired her hand, rebuilt tendons, rebuilt nerves, got everything connected so that it all worked well again. He happens to be also a plastic surgeon and a hand specialist, and that was Dr. Collier. So she's now able to work in that life's profession and entertains us now with her newly acquired guitar playing skills. So we're kind of excited. She hurt her hand, and then she could play the guitar after they were done. That was kind of cool. And she now sings. So I have Chloe, who has always sang, and I have Callie, who now sings and entertains us all the time. She had a best friend in high school who was also her boyfriend. They spent tons of time together, but as things happen, those relationships don't always make it through college and life, and now she has a new young man in her life, and they are living happily ever after in Kansas City. Our oldest son is Cody. As most oldest children tend to be, he has really been the apple of our eye. We probably brag on him more than others, and I feel guilty saying that, but the kids aren't here, so don't tell them. I've always said that he is off the charts smart, and if you've ever conversed with him, you'll know that he can discuss a myriad of topics. He's an avid reader and researcher, and when he was in high school, he chose to leave Plattsburgh High School and attend the Missouri Academy of Math and Science to challenge his mental abilities. It was a great day for Cody. I think it lowered the scores at Plattsburgh High School just a little bit. They used that story. Okay. It was a success story, right? In school, he was a versatile musician. He plays all kinds of instruments. He sang, and he may have been the best academic team and science Olympiad member that ever walked out of Plattsburgh High School or Missouri Academy. He also mowed yards around Plattsburgh. He worked at Price Chopper, and he did the normal things that teenage kids do. That was tough to let him move away when he was 15 years old, but he did well and he excelled. From there, just the latest update is he went to the University of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, got a degree in Chinese and religious studies. That in a quarter, what are you going to do? But actually, he utilized that. He became fluent in Mandarin, and then he moved to China. He furthered his studies in Beijing. He became very much more fluent in Mandarin, and subsequently, for the last 4 years, he's been working for the State Department as a Foreign Service member. He's been living there for 4 years, and this month, he moved back to the United States. So Mama is very, very happy. I'm not so sure about his career choice coming up, but he has decided to go back to school for a law degree. He was accepted in many really great schools, and he has chosen to go to school at Washington University in St. Louis, which means he is now 4 hours away instead of 28 hours by air. He now lives there and will be traveling back and forth to visit us. There. You may be wondering, why am I listening to Robin brag on her children during church today? Honestly, I'm sharing this background with you so that you can relate to our family. We're a small town. We're involved with our church. Those children's parents are still married. 34 years on Friday will be our anniversary. We've got like an average life, a comfortable existence. Nothing really out of the ordinary. We don't have any abuse. We don't have any trauma. We don't have any scandals. We're just an average, okay, middle-class family. As parents, we raised our kids relatively equally and similarly, letting them go beyond our boundaries and supporting them in their pathways. I would venture to say that most people would say, especially the people that know us in this church, that they also cared about our kids and what was going on in their lives. Our children today are welcomed into this church with open hearts, open minds, open doors. So let me share with you that when Cody was 12, he had a girlfriend. Typical middle school thing. Mom worries about what they're doing. Mom worries about if they're still going together. Mom worries about all those kinds of things. I went out of town to a meeting, and Cody and I kept in touch through this really cool new technology called texting. All of us now live and die by a text, and we probably get 3,000 of them a day. But back then, it was pretty cool, and it enabled you to talk without necessarily having to be face-to-face. And so sometimes you could say a little bit more than you would have if you were face-to-face. We chatted about his school day, the upcoming school dance. He seemed just a little bit down, I could tell, and I asked him what was wrong. Are you having girl problems? His answer stunned me and sent me into an internet searching, book reading, crazy mom trying to figure out what his answer was. It wasn't girl problems, it was boy problems. That was his answer. I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing, the chair I was sitting on, and how I felt. It was in New Orleans, it was in a hotel, and I had 1,000 people probably around me. I've had many LGBTQ friends in my life, but never had I thought that one of my children would be one. I don't know why I thought I was immune, just so happened. My feelings were shocked, confused, sad, relieved that he had confided in me, nervous, and somewhat isolated. I asked Cody lots of questions. Are you sure? Are you sure? Do you think it's just a phase? Are you suicidal? Because that's a very common trait of a young and older LGBTQ person. And actually, that was what struck the most fear into me. So I didn't want this to just be swept under the table. I asked other people, men in my life, such as my husband, people that I worked with that were confidants, is this a normal boy thing? Will he grow out of it? What can I do? What I did learn in the whole thing was that the thing I could do was to make sure that he knew he was loved, that he knew that we supported him no matter what, that I still believed in him and all of his endeavors. I would still be his mom and his very best supporter. At that time when Cody was 12, he asked me not to share that information with Dad. He didn't want to disappoint Dad, as many young people do. He just almost, I think inside, sometimes he felt he wasn't sure either, and so he didn't want to put Dad through this and then pull him back in or go back and forth. So he didn't share that with Brett. As Cody was still figuring everything out and knew it would stun Brett, as a wife and mom and someone who pretty much shares everything with her husband, I told Brett. I had to tell him. And it was tough. Brett is one of the very best parents and partners a person could find. And in this scenario, he definitely continued to be that. Honestly, we had a few cries. Not so much because we were disappointed, but because we were worried about so many things. We were worried that he would be bullied, that he'd get the bejeeminy kicked out of him sometime just because. We worried about abuse, potential partners, things we hear about the community. It's not a good thing. Boy Scouts. We worried about Boy Scouts. What's he going to do about Boy Scouts? That ended up that he left Boy Scouts, not so much, I think, because he was gay, but because it was time for him to move into something else. And the most selfish one, and we still, I think, struggle with this a little bit, is that Cody won't ever have grandchildren of ours, and they won't carry on the Dickerson name. So that's kind of a sad thing. One other thought that came into our head was, how do we tell our friends? Do we tell our friends? Do we share with people? Are we completely open? This is my daughter Chloe and her husband. This is my daughter Callie and her boyfriend. And this is my son Cody and his husband. Who will shun us? Who will accept us? What do we do when people tell tasteless jokes? What do we do when someone says, oh, so-and-so is such a fag? Those hurt more than anything. And those words come out of people that stun you every day, that you would never think would say it. And then, of course, the silent judgment is always there, and that's a tough one. Some of the challenges with name calling and things like that, I mean, Brett really had to endure that because middle school, he teaches middle school, and kids there are kind of learning their rank in society and their differences among each other, and so they tend to throw around name calling pretty aggressively. And I think he probably had many discussions with children about how they should not judge people, how they do not need to label. And that's still something that Brett's very passionate about, is this labeling of people. We have encountered a few judgmental, holier-than-thou people. A few people, I kind of refer to them as ignorant, so here I am labeling myself, that told us our son was a sinner and was going to go to hell. Those comments certainly hurt, and we came to the conclusion over the years of dealing with it is that no one chooses to be subjected to that kind of abuse, that kind of name-calling, that kind of life where they're shunned, they're told they're going to hell, etc. So to choose to be gay and subject themselves to that ridicule just doesn't make sense. And so therefore, Cody's life is the way it's supposed to be. God's gift of liberating love embraces every creation. Cody's created by God. We are all created by God. We're all different. We all have flaws. We're not perfect. But we're all created by God and loved. We accept Cody. We accept his lifestyle. And we want him to be accepted by everyone else too. Cody's continued his faith journey through all of this. It would be really easy to say, well, if Christian people don't like me, I'm not going to participate. But he regularly attended church in Pittsburgh while he was in college, and he even attended church in China, where he's been the last 4 years. And yes, there are churches now in China, in Beijing and Shanghai. There are Congregational Episcopal Catholic churches around. Episcopal doctrine is much more open to the LGBTQ issues than the United Methodist Church. And this is where he has primarily attended church. So he's mostly gone to Episcopalian churches. In China, believe it or not, he went to the Catholic Church. Catholics are a little less tolerant of LGBTQ issues than the United Methodist Church. So fast forward to what has probably been in front of all of us in the last couple of years, to the 2019 United Methodist Church Conference. A lot of discussion and angst has been shared about statements in our Book of Discipline. It is a bit contrary in its verbiage. We affirm that all persons are of sacred worth. All need ministry. Then in the next statement, added in 1972, homosexuality is not compatible with Christian teaching. Then in the next statement, we affirm that God's grace is there for all. So it kind of goes a little bit back and forth. It's everybody except these few. In my mind, every time I hear open hearts, open doors, open minds, I add, except for my son and other LGBTQ people. That breaks my heart. So this is why I'm sharing this story. There is an opportunity to make our church truly an open doors, open hearts, open minds, and inclusive of everyone church. We don't have to split. We don't have to break away. or feel like we're torn between showing love for our fellow people versus rejecting them because of who they are. I'd like to introduce you to a process called Reconciling Ministries Network. Our church board has agreed to investigating and potentially pursuing becoming a Reconciling Ministries Network UMC church. Now, by this, I don't mean that it's a done deal. It is something that everyone has a part of and everyone has a vote in. Hopefully, it'll be accepted. I do mean that we are moving forward with investigating, understanding, educating, and prayerfully considering the acceptance of the Reconciling Ministry Network. So what is the Reconciling Ministry Network? There's a lot of words on this page, but basically, the Reconciling Ministry Network is an organization seeking the inclusion of people of all sexual orientations and gender identities in both the policy and practices of United Methodist Church. It is one of many welcoming congregation organizations to emerge in the 80s, so it's been around. The ministry currently has over 900 affiliated congregations and 35,000 affiliated individuals. I didn't get all of my homework done because I would have told you how many churches we actually have in the United States, but it's a pretty significant amount who have accepted this. What the process or the basics of how we're going to move forward is, how it's going to happen, is we're going to identify every reconciling process is unique. Each church is individual. There may be a church just ready to go, and everyone's on board. There may be a church where 50% are completely supportive. There may be somewhere where 5% are supportive and 95% aren't. Time will be needed. It's not something that is going to be rushed into. We're looking at probably at least 6 months, maybe a year of learning process. We will then basically establish a core team to lead the church or community throughout these things. And then parts of that will be considerable amounts of prayer, storytelling. I think I get the first one of that, storytelling. Personal meetings, relationship building, Bible study, dialogue, discussion groups, book clubs, continuing education events, et cetera, that will help educate people so that you do feel comfortable. And whatever basically works for our people and our setting is what we want to do. So the basic steps, we draft a reconciling statement that represents our church and its value of equality and inclusion. We schedule and advertise and hold votes to adopt a reconciling statement. And then we notify RMN, Reconciling Ministries Network, that we are one. And then we are listed and advertised throughout the Methodist Church that that's what kind of a church we are. That we are open hearts, open minds, open doors to everybody. There are 10 top reasons why I think that we should be a participant in the Reconciling Ministries Network. And over the next few weeks, I'm going to go through all 10, but I'm going to take you right now to number 1. Maybe. There we go. Whoop, back. Oh yeah, how do I go back? Swipe. So the number 1 reason is basically to live as disciples of Christ who calls us to be light in the darkness and neighbor to all, most especially to those who are unjustly pushed to the margins, and that we need to remember that Jesus Christ said, love your neighbors as yourself. Now go and do likewise. I appreciate that you listened this morning. I'm, of course, willing to talk to anybody, discuss with anybody. I'm not a counselor by any means, but I'm happy to share. I hope that you'll consider this. I hope that you'll get involved over the next several months in learning more. I know that we have a ton of books from all different perspectives, We have a great video series that talks about the biblical references and the discussions around those. So those are available to everyone, and we'll be happy to share those. So at this point, I'll close, and I'll take you into Cassie and getting started with communion.